We'll start with a different candidate for each question, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. A few things to remember. This forum is for voters to get to know you. Focus on your own strengths, qualifications, and ideas, and avoid disrespecting other candidates. Make sure you are answering the question. Please keep your eyes on the time. You will be given a 15-second warning. When you see that, wrap up your answer so we can move on when your time is up. We have 6 scheduled questions, but we would like to add a 7th with time permitting. Starting around 6:25, we'll have 1 minute for closing remarks. So let's get started. Opening remarks, Mr. Damian Lara.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the Bernalillo County Democratic Party for hosting this, and all of the chairs and vice chairs, and of course, I would not be remiss if I didn't thank Labor for being here. So thank you all so much. My name is Damian Lara, or as my mother calls me, Damian Lara, but everybody calls me a Democrat. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up in southeast New Mexico working in the fields as a farm worker. I pulled potatoes out of the ground and mowed onions during the summers. And I graduated from right here at UNM School of Law, and I have over 20 years of public service experience working for the people of New Mexico who at first gave me an opportunity to work and put food on the table. And I am ever grateful, and I will pay that debt back until my last breath. I've served as the Deputy Bernalillo County Assessor, the Vice Chair of the Assessor's Affiliate. That means that all 33 county assessors actually voted for me to represent them in Santa Fe and spearhead their legislation. I am proud to serve and have a breadth of experience in the office and in economic development, in passing budgets, in legislation, and in the policies and procedures of the office. I have that experience, and I will use it to be an advocate for the property owners of Bernalillo County. I want to make sure that I listen to you, and that I do what's best for you and your families. And I also will advocate for families and small and local businesses. I pledge to you to be an environmentalist, to transfer the assessor's gas-guzzling fleet of over 100 vehicles, who just purchased 3 brand new SUVs this year, into electric vehicles. I plan to be pro-labor, and I am proud to have the endorsement of the New Mexico Central Labor Council. I also will fight for our veterans and our seniors, and proud to have the endorsement of Senator Harold Polk, who is a veteran. I will also make sure that our seniors put forth the quality and senior fees exemptions that they deserve. Once again, Damian Lara, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Opening remarks now by Mr. Stephen Seiss, 2 minutes each. I'm sorry, I said it before. So, Mr. Stephen Seiss.
Thank you. Thank you again very much for allowing me the opportunity to be here. Thank you also to the Democratic Party of Bernalillo County, to IBEW for hosting this event, so we can get out and speak to the public, speak to the voters who care and who elect the next assessor. My name is Stephen Seiss. I was born and raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My family comes from the North Valley, went to Downward High School. I live with my wife and my 2 children now in the Northeast Heights. After I graduated high school, I left to go and proudly serve the United States, to serve my country as a United States Marine. I proudly served my country. And I learned at a very young age that I had a call to a lifelong call of service. Public servant is something that I live my life by. Service is everything to me. I served as a Marine. I also served as a leader of a church. And I also have worked as a public servant in the assessor's office for nearly 20 years. I have spent my 18 years of experience in the assessor's office working in every single department. I have a passion for the work in the assessor's office. I have a passion that has helped me to become a leader and a mentor to many people who have worked in that office over the 18 years that I have worked there. I have helped many assessors throughout the entire state as well as an advisor and as a president for the New Mexico chapter of the International Association of Assessing Officers. I'm also an instructor for the International Association of Assessing Officers, where I get to instruct assessors and their employees across the entire state. I love my job. I love the assessor's office, and I want nothing more to continue to serve the assessor's office the best way that I can, and that's by putting the residents of Bernalillo County first and educating the public and continuing to support and advocate for the work that the current assessor has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. All right, our next question is going to be 1 minute each. What are the constitutional and statutory responsibilities of the assessor's office, and how do you plan on implementing them? And Mr. Seiss, you'll go first.
So, the constitutional responsibilities of the assessor is to follow New Mexico tax law and ensure that all properties are assessed fairly and accurately. And we do this by having well-educated employees, by making sure that they have the certifications that they deserve to have and they need to have, to make sure that they are fairly valuing properties, whether that be residential, commercial, personal property, or manufactured homes for agricultural exemptions. They also have the responsibility to ensure that all exemptions are being applied on properties accurately. That's ensuring that veterans are receiving the exemptions that they have fought hard and deserve. Also, that the seniors who qualify for a value freeze, that they have the resources to know that they qualify for this freeze program. And also those who take advantage of their agricultural properties that benefit the entire community, that they receive these as well.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. Mr. Lott.
So the county assessor's office are actually in our New Mexico State Constitution, as are several of the exemptions that are provided in property. Absent a constitutional amendment, we cannot provide the exemptions to properties like senior citizens, and only based on those constitutional reforms, for example, income. Same for the veterans exemptions. That is in our Constitution, and it is a constitutional amendment that would require any additional changes to that. But it also has a lot of the other exemptions that you may not remember. For example, churches, schools, all of those are in our Constitution, and absent a constitutional amendment, they would not be changed. It is important to have a background in our Constitution and in our statutes, not just the Constitution, but also the property tax code that provides the way for assessments to be done. It also provides timelines that the assessor's office must provide a notice of value by April 1st, if not seek an exemption and an extension from the department. As an attorney who worked in the Revenue Stabilization Tax Policy Committee, I am extremely familiar with all of the constitutional and statutory exemptions and qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lana. Our next question is 1 minute each, again, 2 minutes total. What role do you believe that the county treasurer and the New Mexico Tax Property Division has as relates to the assessor's office, and what would be your expectation or responsibility in working with them? Mr. Lana, you'll go first this time.
Thank you so much. The county assessor's office is the same, or the other side of the same coin as the county treasurer's office. We provide the valuations for business personal property, commercial non-residential property, as well as residential real estate property. We also are required to put the valuation on ag and livestock, as well as on utilities, oil and gas pipelines, which many assessors forget, and that needs to be valid as well. We provide the tax rolls to the treasurer, and then they go ahead and send out the tax bills. But we also make sure that the exemptions are provided accurately and that they're done legitimately. And we're also able to work with the county and the state to ensure that industrial revenue bonds and other property tax saving initiatives for economic development are placed. Property Tax Division is the oversight agency of the state that oversees all 33 county assessors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lana. Mr. Seiss.
So the assessor's office works very closely with the treasurer's office, as it should. In our new location, we're sharing the same floor and right next to each other. The assessor's office does not send property tax bills, nor do we accept property tax payments at the assessor's office. So it's important to educate the public to know the responsibilities and roles of each department. But what the assessor does is they ensure that values are accurately placed on the tax roll, and that property owners are allowed an adequate time to appeal the value if they feel that is needed. And in doing so, we're able to establish an an assessed value that is accurate and fair that goes to the treasurer's office so they can generate the tax bills. And when property owners receive those tax bills, there's no surprises as to what they are going to be paying on that property. It's important for this relationship to be intact and continue to be a good relationship so that the residents of Bernalillo County are able to know what they are paying and be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. Our next question, again, 1 minute each, 2 minutes total. Do you support tax incremental developmental districts, TIDDS, and public improvement districts, PIDS? If so, how would you implement them internally and externally to ensure that the best interest of the taxpayer is at the forefront? If not, explain why not. Mr. Seiss.
Thank you. I think this is kind of a fine line to walk between pins and tips. They do provide a great benefit to our community. They provide a benefit because they allow communities to grow. We've seen the benefits of them on the outskirts of our county that have allowed new development to take place in residential properties. We've also seen the benefit of them allowing corporations to come into our county and to create jobs for many people and to take root here, which is great. But there's also the fine line of having too much. Because when there's too much, the tax burdens that they create get pushed onto the residents. So I think it's important to look at each one individually and to make sure that we are making the correct decision, not for necessarily the corporation, but for the residents of Bernalillo County. So we can make sure that the benefit is coming back to the residents here and not back to corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. Mr. Lott.
So I've actually worked on legislation that amended these to ensure that property owners and the residents of New Mexico benefited more from these districts. I also implemented the base year for the Mesa del Sol TID almost 8 to 9 years ago, and we've seen the benefit of correctly implementing a good TID. For example, we now have Netflix spending over $1 billion over the next 10 years in the state of New Mexico. We've seen great communities coming forth and moving forward. But I will also work on, for example, the proposed South UNM campus TID that is currently before the city of Albuquerque. We have to evaluate the factors and ensure that the tax increment that is placed goes for infrastructure and infrastructure alone to benefit the residents. I know the right criteria to use because I've helped develop that legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Our next question, our fifth one is again 1 minute each, 2 minutes total. The assessor's affiliate pushes, drives, and sometimes kills legislation based on the safety and solvency of the tax roll. As assessor for the largest county in the state, how would you ensure that your work with your colleagues and state legislatures to protect the evaluation of Bernalillo properties? Mr. Lott.
Thank you so much. So, as a county assessor, I pledge to you to be your advocate. I am not the advocate for the taxing entities that want to preserve the tax revenue. My job, if you will have me as your assessor, is to be your advocate, to listen to you. That's why I have the endorsement of over 7 senators and over 15 House of Representatives who know my work. As the vice chair of the Assessor's Affiliate, I actually spearheaded a series of initiatives and reforms that benefited property tax owners here in New Mexico that were so great that the IAAO, which is the industry that sets it, recognized the state of New Mexico as having the most progressive and most forward-thinking tax code in the country. I was proud and honored to receive that award on behalf of the New Mexico State Legislature. So, my job and my constitutional responsibility to you as a property owner is to have fair and equitable assessments of property, not to preserve or increase tax revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Mr. Seiss.
Thank you. I think it's important for people to know that the assessor's office is not a legislative body. It does not set legislative statutes. It does not set the guidelines for legislation. But what I will do as the assessor is to ensure that accurate data is provided to those who we trust to make those decisions in Santa Fe. I would make sure that they are given every opportunity to review the information available in our office. I would make sure that whenever they have legislation to present, that they are doing it with the utmost knowledge that is available to them. Because it is important for them to make decisions that benefit us. It's important for them to make decisions that are good for the people of Bernalillo County. And I will make sure that we provide them with all the information that they require, without any type of political stance on that, so that way they can serve as we voted them to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. Our next question, again, 1 minute each, 2 minutes total. Currently, there exists a policy that impacts seniors and people living with disabilities age 65 and older who make less than $37,000 a year. It freezes the value of their property until they sell it. In recent years, the threshold was increased and a consumer price index added in to adjust for inflation. What outreach would you implement in your office to help our senior citizens and people with disabilities to know about this exemption? Mr. Seiss.
Thank you. I have a huge place in my heart for senior citizens. I have a huge place in my heart to help them and to provide everything that is available to them. I would ensure that the assessor's office goes to them, goes to where they are. I would coordinate with our senior programs. I would coordinate with different facilities where the assessor's office can go and be present to our senior citizens where they are, meet them where they're at. They don't want to come downtown. They don't want to have to park and come into our building and go through the process of filling out the paperwork. But I want to make it simple for them. And I will do that. I will go to where they are. I will have a team who are trained to make the process easy for them, so that they can be able to receive these benefits that they may not even be aware that they qualify for. I would make it a simple process, so that's not something that they just put off because they don't want to deal with it and end up with a higher tax burden because of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. Our next question, again, 1 minute each, 2 minutes total. Oh, sorry, Mr. Lott. You're answering that question. Sorry.
Who's going to tell me when they go? So yes, the extension, adding a consumer price index for inflation was actually one of the reforms that I spearheaded in Santa Fe to make sure that senior citizens provided a better valuation and make sure that more senior citizens qualified for that valuation freeze. I will try and expand that as well. Currently, the state legislature stopped taxing income taxes on Social Security. But guess what? You as a senior are still taxed with that valuation on Social Security in making up that $37,000 a year. So that's something that, as an elected official, I would listen to seniors and advocate for them on their behalf to expand senior citizen freeze. And I will continue to have an outreach program. As the deputy assessor, I actually held those workshops for education of seniors in senior citizen centers in our city hall. And I will have an entire program dedicated to outreach to seniors, veterans, and our agricultural subsistence farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Our next question, again, 1 minute each, 2 minutes total. Oftentimes, appraisers visit sites and interact with property owners to determine a property's value. How will you ensure appraisers have effective customer service skills and are properly trained to determine accurate property values? Mr. Lott.
I'm sorry, can you
use another microphone? Your microphone isn't on live stream.
Oh.
Ask to borrow Mr. Seiss' microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Seiss. I'm sure Ms. Wanda will be fair and equitable with the allocation of times. Yes, I didn't realize my mic was on. I didn't know what you were talking about. My mic was on.
Here we go.
Thank you to my lovely wife for letting me know that those of us watching the streaming weren't hearing my brilliant answers, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm going to read it again.
Yes, please do.
Oftentimes, appraisers visit sites and interact with property owners to determine a property's value. How will you ensure appraisers have effective customer service skills and are properly trained to determine accurate property values?
Absolutely. So customer service is one of the departments that I oversaw as the deputy assessor. I also oversaw the quality evaluation and quality control department to ensure that we had proper procedures and training. I want to make sure that we pay quality wages for quality assessments so that we have the right people with the right tools and implement environmentally safe technology so that they can have that. And I'll let them know. I'll let our appraisers know that one of the statutes in the property tax code is that we're not allowed on your property if you don't want us there. So we will respect that and move on. And we'll find aerial photography or maybe even the use of drones to be able to get that safely and correctly. We want to make sure that we are respectful of people's privacy and make sure that they have the right training and tools to do the job correctly. And I will make sure that we're paying equal pay for equal work regardless of gender. Thank you.
Mr. Sykes.
And I think it's important to have ongoing training. I will implement a high-level continuing education program, and I will hold appraisers accountable to that. The assessment industry is constantly evolving, and it's important for the appraisal staff at the assessor's office to keep up with that evolution. I will make sure that they are not only trained in the assessment industry, the assessment field, but they also expand their training to customer service skills, to communication skills, to have the ability to communicate with people out in the field, especially when they're approaching property owners at their doorstep. I will make sure that they have the tools to be successful in the field, to adequately value property, to make the property visit as quick and easy as possible for the property owner. And I will also ensure that our appraisal staff is paid adequately. I've seen far too many times our appraisal staff leave for other jobs or other positions. So I'll make sure that through the training and their pay, that they have the work that they love and enjoy doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. I don't know if we have time for the bonus question. No, so we're going to go with closing remarks. Opening remarks begin with Mr. Damian Lara. Closing remarks will begin with Mr. Stephen Sykes.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here this evening and to meet with you all. Again, I've worked in the assessor's office for nearly 20 years. I've been a commercial appraiser, residential appraiser, a trainer for the assessor's office, and a trainer for assessor's offices across the entire state. I am passionate about the work of the assessor. That is all I want to do is be the assessor. I am not somebody who's seeking political advancement in my life. I just want to serve as the assessor. I want to continue to be the public servant that I know that I'm called to be. I hope that I can serve the residents of Bernalillo County as the next assessor. So I please ask you to vote for Stephen Sykes for Bernalillo County Assessor. And if you still have any questions, concerns on any of this, please visit my website at sykesforassessor.com and reach out to me. We'll have a personal discussion. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity this evening.
I'd like to thank both Damian Lara and Stephen Sykes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Good to say, Mr. Lara, your closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Damian Lara, David Lara, I know it's a hard name to pronounce, but that's why I'm here to announce. Damian Lara is the name to know for your Bernalillo County Assessor vote. The County Assessor is an elected official. I am a state-certified appraiser and a real estate attorney, so I am more than qualified to put values on not just real estate, but on business personal property, mobile homes, and utilities. I've done that work, and I know it well. An assessor has to do more than value property and be more than an appraiser. An assessor has to pass budgets through the county commission. I've done that work, I have that experience, and I am endorsed by 3 out of the 5 current county commissioners. An assessor has to advocate for property owners and pass legislation on their behalf in the state legislature. I have done that. I have that experience. I am insured to advocate for you. Once again, Damien Lara. You can look at my website at damienlara.com, and I will listen to you and advocate for you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank both the assessors candidates, Mr. Stephen Seiss and Damian Lara, for appearing tonight. At this time, we'd like to invite the sheriff's candidates to come on stage, and then we'll return the mic over to Vice Chair of the Democratic Party of Bernalillo County, Marisol Enriquez.
And if you still want to talk property tax code, I'd be happy to do that right outside.
Hi everybody, Marisol Enriquez, Deputy Vice Chair of the Democratic
Take it with me to the studio.
Thank you. I just wanted to come to you all tonight. Thank you for being here. In addition to being the Executive Vice Chair, I chair a committee called the Grassroots Activist Support Committee. So if you have any grassroots activists out here who are trying to get out the vote and to get into their communities, our group provides training and resources for how to do that, how to be effective board leaders in your communities, so that we can get behind these candidates and get Democrats on the ballot and on voted for in the midterms, right? We want to turn this state blue. So thank you all for being here. We have provided good training resources for how to have conversations with people across the political divide, how to find and bridge the gaps for everybody with particular topics of passion and meaning for them. So this is our effort. We're really trying to get out to the grassroots activism. So if you are volunteering today, if you are working to get with your candidates today, come see me. We'll get some information to you on how to be really effective in that role. Thank you all. And I'm turning this over to Mr. Ed Nunez, right back over. Mr. Paul, Mr. Ed Nunez.
One second. Let me see where I put it. No, fine.
Look at my back. Okay, wait for this. SNEDEKER. No.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Somebody have a marker?
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
We apologize, Phil.
There's Sharon. There's Phil, there's Lucy, there's. Well,
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Bernalillo County Sheriff Forum Questions. We'll start with 2-minute opening remarks from each candidate, then we will begin the forum questions. We will start with a different candidate for each question, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. A few things to remember. This forum is for voters to get to know you, focus on your own strengths, qualifications, and ideas, and avoid disrespecting other candidates. Make sure you're answering the question. Please keep an eye on the time. You will be given, on your time, you will be given a 15-second warning. When you see that, please wrap up your answers so we can move on when your time is up. We have 5 scheduled questions. We would like to add a 6th with time permitting. We're going to announce our opening remarks. First, Mr. John Allen.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the Democratic Party of Bernalillo County for hosting all of us so we can answer your questions and get to know you better. My name is John Allen. I was born and raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Graduated as a big-time Mustang out of West Mesa. Then at that time, I went to the University of New Mexico before I started my career in the New Mexico State Police in 1997 up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where I met my beautiful wife out here, Athena Allen. While up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, in 2001, I lateraled to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, where I worked at patrol, and then I was worked as a detective for violent crimes and then homicide. While I was there, I also worked for the Special Weapons and Tactics team, and then I became a supervisor all over those units. During that time, I became one of the few master use of force instructors and defensive tactics instructors in the States, so I'm well keen on training and what needs to be done at the Sheriff's Department. I was also a sergeant with the mobile crisis team, which is a huge platform of mine, is mental health. And that's making sure that we put a clinician with a uniformed deputy so we make sure that we respond to our mental health calls appropriately. I retired in January of 2020, and I currently teach as a CNN lead law enforcement instructor, so I help with Albuquerque Police Department's reform, and I also train numerous other departments from around the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Phil Snedeker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phil Snedeker. I'm a candidate, as you know, for Bernalillo County Sheriff. I grew up in Silver City, southern New Mexico. I've been in law enforcement for 47 years. I went to college at Western New Mexico University in Silver City. I obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in social science. I went on for a year more and obtained a Master of Arts degree in educational administration while I was in college and pursuing my formal education. I was employed by the Silver City Police Department, the Municipal Police Department. I worked there during my college years. Upon completion of my formal education, I was employed by the New Mexico State Police for a 10-year period. I was initially assigned in Santa Fe, subsequently in Farmington, and subsequently in Tucumcari, New Mexico. While I was in Tucumcari, I was elected as a Democratic sheriff Coy County, a certain land capacity. Once I completed my terms, I came here to Albuquerque in 1991, and I've been employed as an administrator for the last 32 years by the State Probation Control Commission here in Albuquerque as an administrator overseeing approximately 200 people in their activities. I'm interested in providing for the safety and well-being of this community and its residents. We also are cognizant of the fact of our responsibilities as a modern society to see that people that are affected with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, alcohol problems, homelessness are also provided with services. I would ask for your consideration, your vote, your support, and I'm open for any questions which we'll be able to do during and after this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snedeker. Mr. Sheridan Hunt.
Thank you so much. And thank you, IEW, for hosting this, as well as the Democratic Party. I'm very excited to be on this panel with a bunch of 20-year cops and be the youngest, freshest face here. I also have to be in the middle of this panel. I do hope to be a transition from the past 20 years of policy. I do not honestly believe that the past 20 years have been beneficial to our community, not at least in terms of public health and public safety. And that is actually what I got my degree in at CNN. I'm very excited to bring real experience about public health and public safety instead of just criminology to this office. I've seen what words we read across our community, and it's fairly simple, in my opinion, to at least stunt the majority of these, and it's cash. You're a cash poor state, and we need to have more means to help our citizens get the benefits that they are entitled to. It is painful that to even get on Social Security, you basically need a lawyer. It's a crime, and we can easily abate that. I'm so excited to actually represent and bring this fresh face to all of you. So I actually like to cut it a little bit early, and thank you all for coming, and remember, early voting starts this weekend. Please get out there and vote for Sheriff Sheridan.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Rudy Moore.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a great day for Bernalillo County. We get to help you make your decision on who you're going to vote for sheriff. Again, I'm Rudy Mora, and I'm running for Bernalillo County Sheriff. I have roughly 27 years in law enforcement. I was born and raised on the west side by two loving parents. I went to West Mesa High School. My parents taught me the value of hard work, discipline, and personal accountability. From there, I was raised, played sports, went on to the Albuquerque Police Department as a police service aide right out of high school. From there, I went to work at the Bernalillo County Detention Center, which taught me a lot of communication skills and how to deal with people in just a whole different way. In 1993, I went to the New Mexico State Police Academy and served in that capacity as a state police officer for 20 years. I worked my way through the ranks from patrol officer. I did undercover work. I worked a K-9 unit for the majority of my career. Promoted all the way to the rank of lieutenant. In 2012, I retired and went to work for the Pueblo Laguna as a task force officer and was assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration, working the trains and buses, stopping illicit transportation of drugs and weapons on the trains and buses. In 2015, I was appointed Bernalillo County Sheriff, Undersheriff. I served in that capacity for 5 years, where I oversaw roughly 400 employees. Was responsible for a $45 million budget. Worked and was responsible for every aspect of operations, administration, and internal affairs. So one area that I was really helpful with was working with the commission to get the mobile crisis team started, and working with the clinicians and getting the funding for that. In 2019, I retired. I went to the chief of police for the Pueblo Laguna. Again, Rudy Mora, I'm running for Bernalillo County Sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Patricio Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez, and thank you to the Democrat Party of Mexico and the IEW. I'm so excited to be here for so many reasons. Some of you in in the crowd. I've had relationships in various stages of my life. I also want to thank my beautiful wife, Denise, for being here. Thank you. And Ed, thanks for putting this together and being our moderator. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the South Valley, and I live there now. As you all may know or may not, the South Valley is part of our unincorporated areas. And I think it's really important to mention that because it's time that we have a sheriff who lives in the unincorporated area. I graduated from Rio Grande High School, very proud of that. I went into the law enforcement community, started with the EPP. I served 20 years there. I worked in field services, narcotics, the gang unit, criminal intelligence unit. Also worked violent crimes, robbery, homicide. Just like Mr. Mora, I had a narcotic K-9. His name was Doobie. I did not name him. But what I really realized working in all those various units is that I have a clear understanding of what the expectations are for those detectives in that role, but I also know what they need to be successful in their positions. And that's really important. After I retired, I took some time off to spend time with my family and heal and kind of recover and get my mental health in a situation where it could be. But I also got involved in community activism. I was board president of the Partnership for Community Action. I went back to work as a school resource officer with the Albuquerque Public Schools, and my immediate focus and attention was to ensure that the work we did in the schools was going to change the school-to-jail pipeline. There's many factors that contribute to that, and in the space that I was in, we were able to do so. We were able to focus on using restorative practices to build relationships with the students and the families and the staff, and we not only reduced crime and behavior in our school, but also in the community. I think it's time that we have a sheriff who understands the connection to the community, our educational system, and of course to the legislature. I was also elected as state representative and served 6 years in that role. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you, and thank you all the candidates for jumping into this race.
Thank you, Mr. Milo. All right, gentlemen, our first question is 1 minute each, 6 minutes total. In your own words, what is racial inequity and what influence has it had on law enforcement? Mr. Snedeker.
Phil Snedeker, the term that Mr. Nunez has utilized refers to inequities, disparities, unfair treatment of people in any type of law enforcement activities, decision making based upon their race, their national origin. It's unacceptable. It will not be tolerated in my administration. I think all of us as good Democrats realize the importance of good solid training, and I mean on a constant and recurring basis, where we all are attuned to the sensitivities and the things that we need to be aware of. We're dealing with various neighborhoods, various communities within our areas of responsibility. We need to see that people are held accountable and be based on violation of law and nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snedeker. Mr. Lund.
So I'm so happy that you're asking this at the electrical union because I do believe the inequities go beyond just specific offenses by law enforcement, but can extend to your labor practices as well that are not enforced. For example, wage theft is hundreds of billions of dollars every year, yet is never handled. That is something that could easily be tasked just a couple of people to actually go knock on some doors. These real injustices that perpetuate the inequality in our communities are the source of poverty and the source of crime. These are how I get money into our communities to help abate. It is nuisance, in my opinion, that we even have this kind of inequality and systemic injustice. So I'm extremely happy to bring a fresh opinion, especially through archaic rules and regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Mora.
Thank you. It's a great question. As operational commander for the New Mexico State Police Highway Criminal Enforcement, I was instrumental in developing the racial profiling policy for the New Mexico State Police and the Department of Public Safety. I worked my entire career making sure that we treat people with dignity and respect. It's something that law enforcement obviously needs to be better at. I live my life that we don't have to be bad to get better. But at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer in personal accountability. I believe that officers need to go out there and enforce the law based on the crime itself. You know, I understand being raised in the west side of Albuquerque, you know, and sometimes being looked down upon because where I live, where I went to school. So I understand the injustices that sometimes often occur. I was an adjunct instructor for the International Chiefs of Police, again, and Project Safe Neighborhoods, and again, taught many officers throughout the United States on racial profiling. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Villalba.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. Thank you, Mr. Nunez. So, this is a very big problem in our community. It has been, not only within the community, but also in our police community. During my time with the Albuquerque Police Department, I was on the other end of that inequity with just a different consequence in comparison to the other person involved. And that really brought a lot of awareness for me about what makeup looks like in our police department. Growing up in the South Valley, we were never exposed to those inequities. I think we were very open and had such a diverse community. But what needs to happen to change that within the police department itself is training, right? So a plan that I have, which I actually started working on as a legislator, is introducing training around cultural competency. And not only for the police department, but also for the community itself, because sometimes those interactions will either throw one or each other into the space. So I think it's important that we understand what we need to do, but we need to have a plan to address that issue in the department, and I have one. I look forward to introducing that as we make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Villalba. All right, gentlemen, we'll begin our next question on page 6. Mr. Allen, can we go ahead?
No, okay, Mr. Allen. Racial inequity is a problem, specifically for communities of color or BIPOC communities. Not just here in the state of New Mexico and County Bernalillo, but all over the nation. As a black man, I completely understand racial inequity because I've been a victim of it on law enforcement until I told them my role. One of the things I'm doing already at CNM is I'm changing that culture. And I will tell you, everybody can talk about training. I'm doing that right now. And I will tell you the lesson plan that we have for the state of New Mexico is completely outdated. It is actually racist within itself. And that's something that we need to update and make sure that that's in the fiber that we train, and also make sure that that's what's being taught, just not at a cadet level, but also people that have been affected or who have been in law enforcement for 2 to 3 years as their training goes on. And as the sheriff, I will make sure that not only is it a problem if there's racial profiling on the highway or another call, to make sure that it's not a systemic problem that it is not carrying on.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Again, our next question, 1 minute each, 6 minutes total. One of the biggest issues with the current sheriff has been lack of oversight and accountability. Would you be amenable to building oversight from outside the department for the sheriff and deputies to be held accountable? Mr. Lund.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that I've heard in this race is body cams, and I'm shocked to read the loose regulations on them. It is not exactly an oversight if you just turn off the camera. I would happily like to see that gets outsourced so that we can have a live feed of shifts, so we know what our officers are doing on the daily. We can give metrics to our community so they can see what's happening on the daily. I'm a very metric-driven person, and I think that our metrics are nowhere to be found, and if they are, they're terrible. So I look forward to actually adding a avenue of accountability that can really be nailed down on, not just by myself, but by everyone, including you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Senator.
I fully support and endorse any involvement by the community. And that's one of the basic tenets of good, solid law enforcement, where we have participation, we have a Sheriff's Office Advisory Review Board. That was put in place because of some of the things that Mr. Nunez has referred to. The community wasn't involved. They felt like their opinions weren't being heard and things of this sort. We would work diligently with them, cooperatively and collaboratively with them. I endorse and fully support the use of body cameras that are operational at all times. And one of the things we do need to do is look at there's been $10 million in lawsuits against the Sheriff's Department for illegal use of force and racially profiled. So we've got to correct that. It's more than training. You can't have a loss of life like that. So we would address all those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Mora.
Thank you. Yes, I fully support involvement with the community when it comes to transparency. But one thing that's for certain is the election. That's the oversight of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. If you're not happy with your sheriff, you get to vote them out. That's the way the Constitution is written. I firmly believe in personal accountability and officer misconduct. I personally, as a chief of police, I've seen this at the highest level where officers are creating an act of moral turpitude and they're facing termination, and law enforcement officers, executives are obligated to submit what's called an LEA 90 to the New Mexico Department of Public Safety's Public Safety Advisory Board. And those things are used as bargaining chips so they can avoid litigation. That needs to stop. You know, if someone commits an act of moral turpitude, that form needs to be submitted to the Academy Board, and those officers need to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Rilola.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nunez. I absolutely agree with transparency so much that in my campaign, I released my personnel records from my time in law enforcement. And I'm going to encourage all of you to look at that. Because I think anyone running for sheriff who has a law enforcement background should release that information to the public. It's going to be invaluable to assess, is this individual going to be capable of leading our department? And of course, that's how we build that trust within the community, especially during our voting time. We need to be transparent as leaders. I was transparent as a leader in my neighborhood association, as a legislator, and I think it's important that people understand who they're going to be supporting. In regards to everything else happening in the department, transparency means many different things. So we have to have those conversations with people in the community to ensure that their expectation of transparency is reasonable and that we can meet it, but also explore different ways that we can be transparent about supporting our marginalized communities and our other communities throughout our Bernalillo County.
Thank you, Mr. Rilola. Mr. Allen.
We have to restore trust in the Sheriff's Department. That's one of the main reasons how we can fight crime. 100% for transparency and accountability. One of the main things I can do with the Sheriff's Oversight Review Board, we can no longer be resistant, like the Sheriff's Department has, on not letting a third-party entity look at what we're doing. The SOAR will have an office next to mine. I have no problem with that. Not only am I not worried about them catching something that's indecent, that's something that we need to catch as a leader. The next thing that we need to catch is there's nothing wrong with having another person from outside a law enforcement entity or someone with experience in law enforcement to tell us if we're actually doing something wrong so we can correct that. So yes, 100% transparency, 100% accountability. SOAR will have an office right next to me.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And our next question, 1 minute each, 2 minutes. So, what does defund the police mean to you? Is there any part of that message that resonates with you, Mr. Snedeker?
Bill Snedeker, I will say adamantly, there is no place for defunding the police. Okay, we need to fully fund law enforcement. We need to fully support law enforcement. We need to, particularly at this time, in this community we all reside in, there's a crime crisis. We have to fully support our police officers, see that they have their needs met when they do their job and protect everyone. So, anything else, I'm not oblivious to it. I'm very cognizant, as I said. We need to fully fund mental health programs. We need to fully fund substance and alcohol abuse programs. We need to fully fund homelessness and addressing societal issues, okay? Funding should be in place for all the issues and problems of society, most importantly for the police.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Mora.
Thank you. Yeah, what it means to me, I'll tell you, when Michelle Lujan Grisham was elected governor, she asked that I sit on her Department of Public Safety transition team. And We sat up there in Santa Fe and we discussed this in depth, and we met with every single entity within the Department of Public Safety, and it was imperative that it was obvious that everything was underfunded. From the crime lab to the backlog on the rape kids, just to overall funding. So the whole persona of defund the police, I'm totally against. Do we need to be better at our resources, our limited resources? Absolutely. And as your next sheriff, I will go in and evaluate where our resources are being deployed and make sure that you as a citizen is getting the best bang for your buck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Rilola.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. It's a great question. So I am not an advocate for defunding the police. In fact, as a legislator, I increased funding for law enforcement for equipment and training. This past legislative cycle, that initial allotment was increased as well. But what I am for, and these are some of the things that I learned as a school resource officer, is that there's plenty of funding and initiative within our communities, within our counties and municipalities. And it's how we use that money to take some of the burden from law enforcement and responding to situations where the social work and services can be provided directly for those communities. I think that the partnership between the police department, the county, the city, and even the state legislature, as you'll see on my website, I have great support from senators and representatives. We have to understand that we have to work together to resolve these issues. Defunding the police was very divisive. We're seeing that it's creating many challenges, and in some cities, they have to now overfund the police to make up for some of those fundings that were taken away. So I think I'm ready. I think Bernalillo County's ready to have the most experienced person as sheriff, which is why I'm running in this county.
Thank you, Mr. Rilola. Mr. Nunn.
I think that it's a ridiculous moniker, in my opinion, because every single city and county, just like Pat here iterated, has seen their police budgets increase, and it's often funding misappropriated. I am here to put those funds into our communities because cash in hand is what I believe really prevents a lot of crime. It's not just someone like fence keeping an honest person honest, it's also a desperate person not needing to jump that fence. So I'm very excited to find more feasible programs and more useful ways to spend our police budget, including hiring more cops and reducing our overtime load. That is a major cost sink on our budgets. And I think that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Allen.
I am not a proponent of defund the police at all. Specifically during this time, as we see in Bernalillo County with the crime crisis that we have. I've been seeing the rise of crime since 2007. Not only is the allocation of resources very proper and important in the Sheriff's Department, we need to make sure that field services is staffed. A lot of people are forgetting fundamental law enforcement 101 and making sure that we have enough units in the field to prevent crime, for them to be seen in your neighborhood, for them to be engaged with your community. For us also as law enforcement to make sure that we're looking at a different approach. It's not always a law enforcement-based approach. As many of these gentlemen have mentioned, I'm a little different area to where I want to expand social workers. We know for a fact that when someone has a mental health crisis, the family and that person themselves does not have any follow-through from any law enforcement entity. We need to make sure that root causes are addressed and that person has the resources to be successful within our community.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Again, our next question, 1 minute each, 6 minutes total. In your opinion, what is the most important skill a Bernalillo County Sheriff should have? Mr. Watt.
Yeah, great question. That's qualifications. I'm a small business owner. I know the importance of an interview, and that's exactly what this is. I'm sitting on an interview, hoping to get hired by you all. I've served every single rank. I hold the highest level, executive level certificate within the Department of Public Safety. I have a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership. I'm an adjunct instructor with International Chiefs of Police. I've been in Northwestern Police Staff and Command. I've been to the Southern Police Institute for Police Leadership. And most importantly, I'm born and raised and invested in this community. I believe in we don't have to be bad to get better. But the most important thing is look at the qualifications. Are Are you going to hire someone that's not qualified, or are you going to hire someone that's qualified? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Viloa.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. I think one of the most important qualifications the sheriff needs is the ability to engage communities, very different communities. The community that they live in, the community that they're supporting, the legislative community, the municipal community, all the different social justice and activist groups that are out there, our faith-based communities, and then of course training. We have to have a sheriff that understands each level of investigation and role because they've worked there. I think that's really important. Rank is really important as well, but I think in this particular role as sheriff, we're going to have people that are going to be running the department. And we're going to have to make sure that we know who we're going to pick to do it because they have to have the same vision that the sheriff has. Community is what is going to make the connection to community is going to make the sheriff's department a success. If that lingers or lacks in any position, we're going to continue to see what we see right now, a sheriff who has used a tax, and we've seen how that's affected our community. So many qualifications, but the priority needs to be the ability to connect to make that change.
Thank you, Mr. Viloa. Mr. Allen.
Leadership to build trust. And what I mean by that is, yes, engaging community is very important. But another aspect of leadership is having to buy in, not just from the Department of Personnel you work for, but your community. That's why the only candidate endorsed by Equality in New Mexico for the LGBTQ plus community. So I'm endorsed by Planned Parenthood to make sure that I protect women's rights and abortion rights and to make sure that I am right for freedom. It's very important to be endorsed by labor unions. It's great to have Democratic leaders behind you, which I do have, to make sure that we can discuss the right legislative bills, what's important for our department, and most importantly, all of you, because we all have to work together. So building that trust, having that engaged community policing, and having the relationships that I already have, we can move forward and we can always evolve and improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Lund.
Normally I don't be right behind a lot of these opinions that the most important qualification is knowing the job, but with 20 years of policy that has led us to this point, I think it's time for a common sense approach. Someone who has a regular person's perspective who's lived in our city, in our county, and has family all over this amazing county. To go into the department and just start telling all the officers, like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why isn't this just like given to the people? It's not important, it's not classified, but it's important data. It may not look great on the department, but we want our people to know what we're doing so we can be held accountable and be given policies that can actually take this department forward. This is not a normal time for sure, and it's time for a common sense approach. I'm very excited to be your next sheriff, and I encourage you to go early vote for Sheriff Sheridan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Monty. Mr. Snedeker.
Bill Snedeker, these are unprecedented times we're facing, ladies and gentlemen. In my view, we need someone as a sheriff that has the educational preparation, the administrative background, and has the actual experience of leadership to lead this department, this community, this city to greatness. I'm the individual to do that. I would ask for your consideration. I would ask for you to consider my background, my educational preparation, my actual work experience. Additionally, I want to say this. It's time for new direction. It's time for change. It's time for someone that has a new vision to run that department and, as I said, to take this community to greatness and to protect this community and provide the services that we need.
Thank you, Mr. Snedeker. Our next question is 1 minute each, 5 minutes total. What is your position on combining Bernalillo County Sheriff's and APD into one regional police force? Mr. Viloa.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez, for that question. Right now, we have to make sure before we look at partnerships that the members of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department have everything that they need. the most advanced training, the ability to perform their jobs in an exemplary manner. I'm not going to be looking for perfection as the sheriff. I'm going to be looking for excellence. And once we've established that opportunity, then we're going to explore how do we kind of sand the boundaries that are creating the jurisdictional challenges within that department. I think at the end of my second term, when I become sheriff, you're going to see a plan that's going to require legislative involvement to create a metro police department. But I will be doing the work as a sheriff to build that bridge to identify what it's going to look like, work with the legislature, so we can come up with a plan that is going to be fair and just for the other departments throughout the state of New Mexico, but really create a streamlined process to make that happen. It'll take almost a decade to make that happen. But the partnerships we can create now are partnerships that I've had my whole career with the Berkeley County Sheriff's Department and the various units that I worked. So starting there, but not finishing there.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Mr. Allen.
Merging Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department and Berkeley Police Department is not a smart idea right now. And the reason I say that is because we're primarily responsible for the unincorporated areas. While I say that also is that it's not difficult to establish and have relationships with the City of Albuquerque and Albuquerque Police Department as we speak. We can do that on day one when I take office. As far as the unincorporated areas, we know that a plethora of calls for service are in the city, and that will pull protection from the unincorporated areas. Not only just the problems that I teach the Albuquerque Police Department, with the Department of Justice there and the allocation of manpower at the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department and APD, we would put all of you at risk while we're trying to figure out how to run a department that's even more efficient. And right now it's not. We have to look at the structure, we have to look at the allocation, we have to look at the resources, and we also have to look at the budget to make sure we serve you all, both in the city and in incorporated areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Munn.
I'll echo a lot of what John Allen has said. It's not in the best interest of individuals to have a organizational retitling, but I do think that strong partnerships and regular joint communication is critical to law enforcement. My number one criticism of all policing is there's not enough interdepartmental communication. Things fall through the bureaucratic cracks for a number of reasons, and we need to find more automated, more continuous, and more asynchronous ways of getting that information to everyone who's involved in that chain. So, tight partnership, yes. Merging into one metro, probably not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. Mr. Snedeker.
Bill Snedeker, I would be opposed to any merging of the two agencies. Studies have shown, and it's a well-established fact, the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department have different areas of responsibilities. Okay, if you merge the two agencies, it would be contrary to what we're trying to establish, community policing concepts. This is what we want to implement and put in place. With police officers, the sheriff's deputies are addressing the specific needs of the specific communities. You've got two specific differences there. So it would be contrary to good police practice and management. Now, we do need to work cooperatively and collaboratively. We need to share resources. We need to share training. We need to share equipment. And I'm prepared to establish those relationships.
Thank you, Mr. Snedeker. Mr. Mora.
Yes, we're at a point right now until the Albuquerque Police Department can complete all the benchmarks under the Department of Justice. It's not a great idea. I do believe in consolidation of services as a taxpayer. You know, I believe dispatch can likely look at being consolidated. When you call 911, people expect the phone to be answered. You know, the fire department currently is already sharing resources and respond closest unit to the call. You know, at the end of the day, I have a great relationship with collaborating with the Albuquerque Police Department. Harold Medina and myself have a great relationship. Chief Tim Johnson with the New Mexico State Police, we have a great relationship. And then my tribal connections as a chief of police for the Pueblo Laguna, you know, it's all about partnerships and we have to help each other. But at the end of the day, the unincorporated areas are the most important thing for the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office to make sure that those unincorporated areas are being served to the fullest potential. I do believe in assisting. Currently, the Albuquerque Police Department and the BCSOA share resources from air unit to special weapons and tactics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Our last question before closing remarks, 1 minute each, 5 minutes total. How do you plan on dealing with youth crime diversion? Mr. Allen.
Youth crime diversion, I just went to a forum on this earlier, and I was talking to a senator in reference to all, just not the gun violence, but the violence that we're starting to see with our youth. And we're seeing 14 to 17, 18 years old. A lot of facets that just not diverting youth. It's the juvenile justice system and the laws that are so behind and they have not evolved. We have to work together, just not with the courts, but with legislators, with social workers. I don't think this is a one-minute answer question. I think it would take a whole room of experts in here with all the studies that we have. But yes, it's very important to divert our youth away from the criminal juvenile justice system. We don't want them in there so they can succeed. We need to give them the resources. And at the same time, also, we need to give parents and families the resources to not only hold their kids accountable, but make sure, not to say raise them right, but a lot of people are single mothers, single fathers, to make sure that they have the resources so we're all working together. So a multifaceted question, I hope I answered it all, but so many things to do that divert youth away from the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Lund.
Again, I'll definitely echo what John said, because it is, again, cash in communities. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, and that goes doubly so for a kid. You need to give them drive, things to do, so they can explore their passions and not get worn down by emotions and do an action that they can't take back. Even older kids, not just teens and 18 under, but up to like 22, you're still developing your brain, you're still trying to find your place in the capital market, you're still trying to build a life for yourself. And we should be absolutely getting resources to everyone so that they can have a smooth path, cradle to grave, through our society. And when the welfare system and the legislative system fails, it's up to the police to pick up the pieces. So it's only right that we start doing that job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Senator.
In my view, is what we primarily need to do is, again, we're addressing a societal issue, not an issue that is specifically in solely the province of law enforcement. We're going to meet our obligations and responsibilities, and we need to establish very strong, proactive relationships with our schools. Okay, we need to be in those schools with school resource officers. We need to be engaged with parents. We need to be engaged with school administrators. We need to be developing partnerships. We need to work with the children at all levels. And where they understand we're there for them, we need to help identify people, children that need to be redirected. I have a 32-year background in probation and parole. That's where we restored lives and we rehabilitated people and we stopped people from illicit behavior. I'm prepared to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Mota.
Thank you. Yes, 100% we have to invest in our youth, plain and simple. I'm a big advocate for having school resource officers in all schools, to include elementary schools. There's many studies that have been shown that children in the elementary school area, if they have a positive role model with law enforcement and they have good encounters with law enforcement, it's proven. The Oakland study is one of the studies that's out there that shows that they follow these children all the way from high school down all the way through high school, and these children that had that school resource officer at every level, they were less likely to have a negative encounter in law enforcement, and they even went on to achieve higher education. So I'm a firm believer in our youth. As a dad, as a grandparent, I'm 100% committed to our children. You know, when it comes to gun violence that we're facing, we have to hit it with a stick, though. We have to hold these kids accountable and get them the treatment and the resources that they need so they can be productive members of society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. I'm proud that I'm the only candidate who has experience in this area. My time as a school resource officer was very challenging because I had to address two systems. One, the law enforcement system, who had a traditional way of what the role of the school resource officer was, but then also the school system. And we were able to navigate both at Hyden High School and at Atrisco Heritage. And I think it's important that we focus our attention on a couple things, training, and what does that relationship look like with that officer in that community. As a state representative, I passed legislation that included our 2 school districts to have the ability to receive funding for training. But they also are going to be specifically trained as school resource officers. What's needed? What are the requirements to be effective in that space? I do not believe that we need a school resource officer in every school. I think we need to be strategic, and where we place our officers, where the focus on building relationships is going to change the culture of crime that we're seeing right now. The culture of crime with our young people is not happening. It's not new. It's been occurring for a while. And our school resource officers and partnerships with the schools can change that. And I'm ready to do that. It will be a priority for me as Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Closing remarks, 1 minute each, 5 minutes total. We will begin with Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes, and I have to appreciate the questions because it kind of covered what I think all of us want to do as sheriff. I think most importantly, I do not believe that the community has lost trust in police. When I talk to people in my community and other communities, the trust that they talk about is they're afraid to call law enforcement because they're afraid of retaliation. This is something that I experienced in my community. And as president of the Neighborhood Association, I brought in all the resources to educate the people in our community about who to call, when to call, and why you should call. My experience in schools to change the culture of crime in that community is really what's going to be on the forefront. And I don't believe that the sheriff should get the deputies or the community to buy into anything. I think their role is to get the community and the members of the sheriff's department to believe that their sheriff has a vision and a plan that's focused on their success. And any challenges that come up need to be addressed in a fair and just manner. The sheriff is the voice of the community and the department. And I'm the most experienced candidate to be able to provide that for Bernalillo County residents.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Mr. Mora.
Thank you. Again, I'm Rudy B. Mona. I'm running for Bernalillo County Sheriff. I spent my entire career as a public servant. I'm ready for the challenge. I've served in every single capacity, all the ranks. As a small business owner, I understand the value of a dollar and the personal accountability to people, to decisions. I believe in a shared vision, and that's one thing that I'm going to implement with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office is a shared vision so we can better serve you, the community. Again, I encourage you to look at my website, look at my qualifications, and most importantly, go out there and vote for your best candidate. I'm Rudy B. Mora. I'm running for Bernalillo County Sheriff, and I appreciate your vote on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mora. Mr. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very brief. You've all been very attentive, and thank you for being here. I have 47 years of law enforcement experience. I'm prepared educationally as an administrator for this position. I'm very well prepared, having served as a law enforcement officer at every level, municipal, as a former county sheriff, as a state police officer, as an administrator for the state probation program. I'm prepared as a trained professional administrator and a trained professional law enforcement officer to move this county to greatness. And I would ask you to support your prayers, your help, your vote very respectfully. And I know we can make a difference. I spent my life in the interest of serving the public. We can do very, very good things in this community, working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Mudd.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nunes, for all the amazing questions, and thank you to the Democratic Party of Bernalillo County for hosting this. I feel honored to be up here with all these candidates. Though I'm extremely happy to be running in this race for this exact reason, two issues which I think are critical to every sheriff today in this county is COVID and gun license. And neither were discussed tonight. And I have plans for both of those issues. In fact, recently I missed a debate because I was impacted by gun violence. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was killed over a pet care dispute. And I don't want you to think ill of her roommate for it. It was a 21-year-old kid who made a bad decision he couldn't take back. It's not just about making sure that these kids have the resources, but it's also making sure that they don't have the option to make a deadly decision that can't be taken back in a second. So please get out and vote. Early voting starts this weekend at many more locations than just the clerk's office. Get out there and vote for Sheridan Lunch, Sheriff Sheridan, and get out there by June 7th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Allen.
What a blessing. Honestly, it's so, I'm grateful to be up here and trying to earn your vote. That's been awesome also to get support from other people, specifically entities within the Democratic Party, such as Senator Martin Heiner, Melanie Stansberry, labor unions, Planned Parenthood, Equality New Mexico, Albuquerque Journal. I'm excited to serve you. And the Sheriff's Office is a dire need of change, not the candidate of change. And that is something that we need to do immediately on day one. We can no longer be hostile towards our public, our community. We no longer even need to be talking about transparency and body cameras. That needs to be something of the past. And we need to evolve and move on. I look forward to your vote. I look forward to supporting you. Just like deputies, they don't work for me. I work for you, and I work for them. I appreciate your vote at electjohnisland.com. Allen for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. On behalf of the Bernalillo County Democratic Party of Bernalillo County, Florida Sheriff Sharon Marisol Enriquez, Vice Chair, we want to thank you for attending Bernalillo County Assessor Forum and also the Sheriff's Forum this evening. Thank you very much.
Real quickly, I just wanted to give a couple thank yous. Thank you to IBEW for hosting us. Great job, all.